So thanks for everybody for coming. I'm Ed Goyette, and somewhere in this screen is my partner Brad. He's around.
I'm
And
here, Ed.
we have a short presentation for you tonight that Brad's going to share. We'll kind of go through kind of where the program came from, give you the ins and outs of it a little bit, and kind of bring you through the whole thing from A to Z. So Brad, if you could just cue that up.
I can.
Fantastic. So this company is called Major Choice, and essentially what we do is we're taking lost and confused students of differing abilities, and we're bringing them to a point of clarity. And you see the mentor-supported career mapping. That's the biggest part of what we do, is providing those mentors. So for Brad and I, a little technical difficulty. So for Brad and I, this is deeply personal. We're both parents of children with neurodivergences. My son has autism, and Brad's child is on the spectrum as well. So everything you're seeing here tonight is coming from deep lived experience with children, who need a little extra help sometimes. So Robin kind of stole my thunder a little bit with the Gallup poll, but I'll go over that again. So according to that Gallup poll, we'll kind of pull out the mentoring side of that. So students with mentors are significantly more engaged than kids who don't have that person to talk to. They're more hopeful about the future, and again, like engaging in that career connected learning, which is a big part of what we do, can significantly boost their engagement and hope in their education. Despite that, only 43% of high schoolers report that they have a trusted adult in their life or a mentor that they can talk to about their future. And when you think about that, we have a generation of kids, especially coming out of the pandemic, that, loneliness, they're overwhelmed on a lot of different levels, and they just don't feel like they have that person that can guide them in the big decisions going forward. And then you think about the state of counseling, guidance counseling in this country, and it's in an absolute crisis. So and this is a real number, guidance counselors are outnumbered 421 to 1. And I know when I went to school, we could go down and talk to the guidance counselor once a week if we wanted to, but that's far from the case now. So this is why we're here. Okay, so what we do is seeing that gap that our kids have fallen into with the lack of direction and all the overwhelming choices they have to make. We provide experienced mentors along with a structured pathfinding program, and we help them make those good decisions. And while we're doing that, we show up in school systems and we actually lessen the burden on those guidance counselors who are so overwhelmed. So we're really kind of filling that gap for a lot of people. So how do we do it? Our pathfinding course is broken down into 3 what we call missions. There's self-exploration, career exploration, and outreach / connected learning and that type of thing. So Brad from here is going to take you through the ins and outs of the course.
Great. Thank you, Ed. Appreciate it. So I apologize in advance. I get very passionate about this, so my hands are probably going to start flying around for those of you who've seen me present in the past, but just very passionate about what we've developed here. So as Ed mentioned, we have 3 missions. I'm going to walk everybody through the 3 missions. And I feel like at the end of the day, what we've created is the perfect blend of self-exploration, career exploration, and experiential learning. And then we've tied it to a mentor. So let me walk you through what that means. So mission 1, we get into path preferences. And I won't get into too many details about that, but that's, innate and basic preferences. Everybody has them, but it could be as simple as getting these students to think about would they rather work inside or outside. Would they rather come up with their own, follow their own ideas, or come up with, or chase somebody else's ideas, just to get them thinking about what it is that, what it is that they need. We go through strengths and challenges. Again, these are all guided through a mentor, but the idea here is to help them identify and recognize, these are my strengths, these are my challenges. What happens a lot of times, and many of you who are listening, we go and pursue a career or a degree, and we spend all this money and time getting that education, only to realize when you enter into the career, it doesn't align with our innate strengths. And you come home and you're exhausted. You're so tired from the work. And it happens all the time. And that's so important for us to go through what those strengths and challenges are, so we can set them up with a career that works to their strengths. We go through personality type, and we use a basis of we have our own, but we use a Myers-Briggs as a basis for that, which many of you, I'm sure, have heard of Myers-Briggs. We get into core values. Love this. Most adults don't know what their core values are, and we dig deep. We have them go through a series of exercises and words to identify. We call them your unshakable truths, right? Those things I like to say to my students, the things that you wear on the back of a t-shirt, 5 words you'd wear on the back of a t-shirt and say, this is me. I don't compromise with these. This is what I stand for. Very powerful for these students to know. We take it even a level deeper, and I'll just put this out there. Those people who love their careers, here are the hands. Those people that love their career and don't think of their work as being work, it's often because it's tied to something that happened or somebody in their lives. Okay, so an event that happened to them, or somebody in their lives that influenced them. And we go through a process of having students identify those, because within that, you'll find that oftentimes those passions and interests that came out of those life events and influencers can be linked to a career. It's really powerful. It's amazing to watch. We get into career needs as well. Career needs is our environmental needs. What do we need? Do we prefer working as a small group, a large group? What is it within a job that we need? And this takes about 2.5 weeks. Okay, so we're working with the students about 2.5 weeks, and all this information produces what we call their career DNA. The career DNA is a 25-point blueprint of everything they need to find true happiness. And it's a very short document, but very powerful. Now that we know who they are as a student, now they're ready to explore careers. And again, we go through a series of exercises housed in our system. And we like to say it's breadcrumb. It's stepped out, 1, 2, 3. It's pretty amazing to see. But they'll go through the series of 2.5 weeks. They'll look at 150 to 200 careers. And again, not all at once, it's stepped out, but they'll take this, massive list of, different jobs, and they'll narrow it down until they call their mentor and they say, oh my gosh, I have identified my 3, this is it, Brad. I got 3 jobs. I couldn't sleep last night. I was so excited. I got 3 jobs. This is it. And then what we'll do is, and all the while, of course, they're looking at industry demands, the key data that they need, because we want to make sure that the job's going to be around in 5 years, right? So they're arming themselves with all this important information, going through job postings, ZipRecruiter, Indeed, getting some of that, experiential, what is it that I need to do? It's amazing. But we take those top 3 jobs, and now what we do is compare it against their career DNA. So line by line by line by line, they go, will this job match with my personality? Does this job match my core values? Does this job match with my interests, my passions, my strengths, my challenges? And they eventually get an alignment score. And if the alignment score is high enough, we get into mission 3. That's the experiential piece, what we call outreach. Here, we work with the students, we coach the students on how to network. And it's real, they look at us like, what network? What are you talking about, right? But it's really neat, because they end up identifying, contacts their parents might have, contacts their teachers might have, but we'll coach them on how to talk to these individuals and ultimately identify people that they can reach out to. And then with the idea that eventually they're going to actually be interviewing these individuals about their job. So now they're learning how to email. We're talking soft skills, communication. So we're coaching them how to email those professionals, how to schedule. And it's awesome to see. Just really, really amazing. And it's much needed. I know as a parent, it is much needed. They need to know this stuff. How to interview, we set up interview questions. We go through that process with them. And, again, it's all about ensuring that we're helping to prep them for that next step. They're interviewing the professionals about their jobs. They're asking them questions about their jobs, but soon enough, the roles are going to be reversed. So it's important for them that it's a nice soft step that way. And we have a huge list of volunteers all across the state willing to talk to these kids. It's amazing. So that in itself is incredibly powerful part of this course. So now they've talked to professionals and they've decided, okay, this is the career, this is the path, the educational path, this is what I'm going to do. And ultimately, at that point, it's about, well, what are the steps that are going to get you there? So it could, again, if it's directly to a career, is it training that they need to take? Is it, do we have to, your resume need to be worked on? What are the steps, those concrete steps that you're going to take to get yourself there? And eventually they sign a commitment letter to themselves that says, I've identified these 5 things. These are a list of actionable items I'm going to take to make this happen. Really, really great to see this happen. I love this part. And we watch people already start these actionable items on our last call, which is awesome. And then once they've identified these are my next steps, it's time to get parents, their guardians back involved. And I should mention, parents and guardians also get updates throughout the course indicating where they are. So there's actually instructions specifying how you can help them with this journey. So that in itself is great for parents who want to be involved. But what we're looking to do now is making sure that everybody's rowing in the same direction, because now that we've identified their path, there's a whole, say if it's college, okay, well, are we doing student loans? Are we doing scholarships? Are they working during the summer to help? I mean, there's a series. So basically to make sure everybody's aligned, a lot of questions need to be answered, and we help shepherd that process. So make sure the last thing we want is to get them to the point where they're ready to go off and they don't have that support. And that's important for us. Quickly, course requirements. We do this only on a laptop or desktop, no mobile use, because cell phones are distractions. And we, as mentors, want the students 100% focused on themselves. Okay. Students must have a Gmail address. Mentor meetings are held over Google Meets or Zoom, and obviously a stable internet connection. Enrollment criteria. I'm just going to go through this really quick. To be successful in the program, students applying in major choice must be able to understand the need for a clear plan for their career or education, show genuine interest in finding a direction, and commit to the program. That's a big thing that we look for during our interview process, application process. Dedicate at least 1.5 hours weekly for coursework and 2 mentor meetings a week as well. We have many students that are in school right now taking our course. Reflect on personal traits, values, passions, and interests. Use basic online tools and conduct research, and when mentor guidance is needed, we will help them with that. Share feelings and think about personal behaviors and goals. Respond to feedback, adjust accordingly, and advocate for oneself with the mentor. That's what we look for. We do, as I mentioned, have an application process. It's very simple. It's on our website. Maybe takes 10 minutes to fill out. And through that process, what we'll do is we'll do you have a brief introduction to major choice, apply. We set up an interview with the student, guardian, parents. We ask them to be there for the first one. Then there's VR is working on a release form if they don't have it already. We once we receive the authorization, we provide the students and the parents, guardians with a bio about their mentor. Part of the interview process is to properly match the mentor with the student, because we like to do that if there's similar interests or whatnot. That's part of the fun, right? Then we we have our first meeting. The mentor onboards the student. We also have a release that needs to be signed that allows us to speak to VR or any other agencies that might be supporting the student, and the course begins. And that is major choice.
Great. Thank you both. I see some questions in the chat about eligibility and cost. I want you to know that we'll get to those. We're going to have Tina present next from New Hampshire Vocational Rehabilitation, and she might answer some of these questions during her presentation too. So I'm going to just share my screen right now with the slides.
Thank you, Robin.
Of course.
Brad, do you have to stop sharing? Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Good evening, everybody. As Robin said, I am Tina Greco, and I am the transition coordinator for vocational rehabilitation. So essentially what that means is I help to provide a level of oversight in regard to the services that we provide that support specifically students with disabilities. So I am super excited to be here tonight and to be sharing with you about our partnership that we now have with Major Choice. And so, Robin, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So I just want to give you some background information first about Voc Rehab or VR New Hampshire. We are both a federally and state funded program. Our main charge is to assist both students and adults to either find or maintain employment. And when you're talking about students in particular, certainly that charge relates to helping the student to really formulate what they'd like to do for employment while they're still in high school, and getting some of that experience while they're still in high school, and really helping them ultimately to make that successful transition from school into life and into the world of work. So our program is mandated by federal legislation that is called the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act. And as part of that, which I will talk about here in a little bit, one of the things that VR is charged to do in terms of services is to provide what's called pre-employment transition services, or PREETs. And these are specific services that are provided to students between the ages of 14 and up to their 22nd birthday. So basically starting as a freshman and going through the length of their high school career. Go ahead, Robin. So basically what we look at when we look at our services overall for students, we want to help them to explore the world of work. So how do we do that? We look at helping them to identify their interests. What are they really good at? And what do they want to do, or what do they need for work experience to gain some of that exploration? I think certainly one of our other charges is that we really want to help somebody to the best of our ability to be able to get onto or to develop a career path. I think often, and we know, and this is completely fine, we know that a lot of times kids are just simply looking for a job. And that's fine. And that is something that VR can assist with. But I think ultimately we do want to help the student to look beyond just a job. And how does that really connect with their interests? And how does that really those interests and even those jobs, how does that really connect to the bigger picture? Once I'm done high school and I get older, and what does that really look like? So hopefully, the kinds of things we can do will really help a student to look towards a career pathway. And then certainly we look to collaborate. So we know that transition probably is one of the most biggest things that involve collaboration, right? In order for a student to be most successful while in high school and beyond, it requires that dance of collaboration. And we know that for some students, those transition teams can be pretty big and can include a lot of different people. So we're looking at, yourselves, parents, guardians, folks from school. We might even be looking at partnerships with local businesses from throughout the state, and then certainly different agencies that may be involved in helping to support that student. Go ahead, Robin. So I'm going to start talking about, Brad had talked about when he just went through his presentation, or Major Choices presentation, some of the eligibility for the program itself. What I'm going to talk to you about now is the eligibility pieces for vocational rehabilitation. So in other words, when we're looking at a student and their potential to participate in Major Choice, what is our qualifying or eligibility criteria in order for a student to be considered? So we basically have two pathways, potentially, one of two pathways that somebody can go down. And the first, which is what I'm going to go over here, is a student who is considered what's called potentially eligible. So potentially eligible for vocational rehabilitation services. And what that means is that that student has not yet applied for or been found eligible for vocational rehabilitation services. And in saying that, they can be as young as age 14, and they can be as, I don't want to say old, but up to the student's 22nd birthday. They do have to be in high school or in some other post-secondary program that provides that leads to a credential. So when we're talking about secondary students, we're talking about students who are going to be getting a high school diploma, certificate of attendance, those kinds of things. We do also work with students who they might be being homeschooled. They might be part of an out-of-district placement, part of juvenile justice. And then certainly when we're talking about vocational rehabilitation and disability, the student either has to have an IEP or an individualized education program, a 504 plan, or if they don't have either of those, they do need to be able to furnish from somewhere that they have a documented disability. So being able to furnish that documentation means that they've been able to go to a specialist or the like, somebody who is credentialed to be able to document that disability. So, and we have 5 pre-employment transition services. And so we can look to provide one or more of those pre-ed services to students with disabilities. Go ahead, Robin. So the next set of eligibility requirement, this is really for a student who is already receiving services from us. So in essence, they have applied and they have been determined eligible for services. So really we have 4 criteria in which we look at eligibility for services for somebody who has applied. So as I was mentioning before, that individual, student or adult, has to have a documented disability. Typically, obviously, we're looking at physical, psychological, intellectual, or sensory impairment. But we're also then looking at, does that disability in some way, shape, or form impede them from either obtaining or maintaining employment? And then looking at, does that person, do they require having vocational rehabilitation as a support to either help them to get or secure employment? We also help people with retention, and we also help people who have lost jobs to regain employment. And then lastly, we look at, can the student benefit in terms of an employment outcome because they received VR services. So, and as is indicated here on the right-hand side of the slide, there are just some different disability examples that are listed as potential. So we really, I think what I want to emphasize here in terms of disability is that we can really look at the gamut. I think one of the things that can be a misnomer about vocational rehabilitation, especially when it comes to students, is that we only work with students with more significant disability. And yes, that's true, but no, we can also be working with students with other disabilities as well. Go ahead, Robin. So why VR&H or Voc Rehab and Major Choice? I think that what really struck us when we first met Brad and Ed, if you can't see that already, is their energy and their passion for the program that they run and why they do what they do. But I think when you really talk about the connection that Voc Rehab is really interested in making for students using Major Choice, is that it is really evident that the program and activities that are provided through the program really link a student to their interests and really focus on real life stuff and real life influence. And I think that's what's really cool is the student, through those various different activities and the missions, can really look at, oh my gosh, this is me. This is me. And how do I and everything around me, how does that influence the choices that I'm making, and specifically around the choices that I might look to make towards employment? So we also really like the fact that it's connecting a student not only to their interests, but relating it back to their personality. We like the fact that it is engaging with that one-on-one mentor, and then also helping students to network and to really engage with employers and employees in their areas of interest. And I can honestly say, in talking with both Brad and Ed, that that they have some really cool connections within the business community. So, and as Brad was talking, mentioning about helping the student to identify their network. And quite frankly, how many students, when you talk about who's in your network, like Brad was saying, how many kids really know what that means? But then when you start really breaking it down for them, this is what that means. And potentially, this is what these folks in your network can help you to do, and how you can leverage what you're looking to do. That's pretty awesome. And I think kids, are really struck by, oh, you know what? I actually do have a network. If I really think about it, I actually really do have a network. So go ahead, Robin. So now I'm going to talk about kind of the criteria that VR has for students who might be interested or a good fit for Major Choice. So as I was mentioning earlier, we have kind of two tracks for eligibility for VR. The first track is a student who is potentially eligible. So that student who has not yet applied for or been found eligible for services. In order to be considered for Major Choice, to apply for Major Choice, they have to meet that definition of student with a disability. So again, That's a student who is between the ages of 14 up to their 22nd birthday. Okay. And they have to be on an IEP or a 504 or have a documented disability. And they have to be in either high school, so secondary education, or a post-secondary program that's going to lead to a credential. They complete a form that we have, which is called the student registration form. And then they have to apply and be accepted to the major choice program in order for VR to contribute funding. So I think that's one of the key pieces to illuminate here, is that funding from VR either way is not necessarily an automatic. So the student does need to apply for major choice, does need to be accepted into major choice in order for VR to help with funding assistance. The next criteria is for that student who is already eligible and receiving VR services. If your son or daughter is in that boat, you will want to talk about major choice with their VR counselor. And that really is a conversation that ultimately comes to an agreement between the VR counselor, the student, their parent and guardian. And if major choice is agreed to as an appropriate service, as part of vocational rehabilitation services, major choice will then be included in that student's individual plan for employment, or IPE. And again, same thing. The eligible student for VR also needs to apply for and be accepted into major choice in order for VR funding to be considered. And I think that's it for me. I did want to mention really quickly, and I'm realizing that didn't include this in my presentation, and Brett, I don't know if it's included in yours either, now that I think about it, but actually talking about the different pre-ETs, the different pre-employment transition services that that major choice covers, and really what those the five pre-ETs are. So those pre-employment transition services as a whole, as I was mentioning, there are 5 of them. So the first is basically job exploration counseling. This isn't in any real order. Job exploration counseling, self-advocacy, work-based learning experiences, exploration around post-secondary, and then work readiness. So one of the things I love about the 5 pre-ETs is they all align in some way, shape, or form to a student's transition process and transition plan if they have an IEP. So, so we really can work together to align things. And then Brad, did you want to talk at all about major choice and the aligning of pre-ETs as well?
No, I think Tina, I think you are, covering everything.
Okay.
I mean,
okay.
but it is probably something we should add in the presentation.
Yeah.
I should.
Yeah. I thought about that as I was going through, but anyway, so that's the VR portion of our presentation this evening.
And so before we move on, just getting back to the program, kind of summing everything up. So the thing that we want everybody to keep in mind, and how we kind of guide our program, is we're meeting the kids where they're at. And the question that we always ask ourselves in this company is what's best for the kids. So at every single standpoint, at every point during the program, from application through graduation, we're answering that question, what's best for the kid. And when they're graduating out of the program, and it's one thing that we didn't touch on, is that we're exploring the range of options for them. So when they're leaving, they do have those 5 things you can do right now to get on your path, which is really important. And we find providing that little link from where they are now to where they're going, and kind of priming that pump, that's when you really see these kids kind of going into gear. And they, every single time, I mean, we shouldn't be surprised by this point, at this point, but these kids come up with another gear that there's a lot of teary eyes over here at Major Choice. Like I'll tell you, it's the most meaningful work that Brad and I have ever done in our lives. So we were honored to be able to share that with you.
Thank you so much to all three of you, Brad, Ed, and Tina. We really, really appreciate it. We have some questions in the chat, and we have about 15 minutes left. So if you're open to it, I'd like to kind of go through the chat and ask you. So our first question is from Tracy Johnson, and she would like to know, how frequently do you work with the student in the first 2.5 weeks? How much face-to-face time is there with the mentor?
You want me to take it, Ed, or?
Sure.
So the meetings are twice a week, and they range from 45 minutes to sometimes an hour, depending on the topic. But those first 2.5 weeks, where it's again self-exploration, and some of that stuff is heavy. So those are some of our lengthier discussions. But I would say on average about 45 minutes twice a week.
Great. Thanks, Brad. Another question, Ava, I saw your question. How do we sign our student up? I think that's been explained, but do you have any additional, feel free to unmute yourself if you have additional questions about signing up and eligibility. Okay. Another question from Liz. Do you support the kids with finding scholarships? Are there special scholarships for kids on the spectrum?
So that's something we don't do right now. We're more getting them to that point of clarity, but no, we don't do the scholarship portion of that.
We do have resources and third parties that we recommend, and there's some wonderful resources here in New Hampshire that we often refer our students to.
Excellent. Gretchen Stallings asked, what is the cost? And I think we've kind of gone over that, but Tina, do you want to clarify cost for the program?
Sure. I don't think I'm going to give a number.
Yeah.
In terms of cost, because it is something that again is covered by Voc Rehab. Again, if that student has applied for and been accepted into Major Choice, and it's something that again the student meets either set of criteria as a potentially eligible student or as an eligible student for VR. So essentially, if the student meets either of those criteria and has been accepted into Major Choice, VR is covering the cost of the program.
Excellent. Thank you. Brianna asks, can students earn high school academic credit for this experience?
So we're not an accredited high school course at this point. That's something hopefully down the road we will be, but not right at this moment.
Yeah, I would assume too it would be a conversation with your school, depending on, what opportunities exist at different high schools.
Mm-hmm.
What is the minimum age for participation?
Brad, do you want me to, or Ed, you want me to take that?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take that from the VR side.
Yeah.
Sure.
So from the VR side, so the ages are really dictated federally in regard to the provision of pre-employment transition services. So we're looking again at the ages of 14 up to the student's 22nd birthday. We have on occasion, not with Major Choice, but we have on occasion considered students younger, so like 13. But that really, when we look at that on a case-by-case basis. And the student really has to have a transition plan as part of their IEP at the age of 13. And the school has to really agree at that point in time that whatever service is being looked at, that they want that as part of the student's transition plan. So really, I would say students younger than, say, a 13-year-old that really comes as a conversation with your school or district first.
And from our perspective, you know, we find that junior and high school is a great jumping off point for what we
Yeah.
do. We have helped kids who are sophomores, but it has to be the right sophomore. So we're definitely looking for students to engage with that are looking toward the future and really motivated. And we're finding junior year is usually the best jumping off point. But again,
Yeah,
everything's individualized.
our typical age though is 16 to 24. That's usually what we find
Exactly.
our students to be. Yeah.
Thank you. Nancy is asking, what attributes makes what attributes are they looking for from the student in the application process? I think you all had a slide that went over this.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak to it really quickly. Self-awareness, self-reflection, commitment. I mean, again, we can expand on that in the Q&A later, but from our perspective, they have to be able to self-reflect, self-advocate, and we need a commitment. And the commitment, I will say, the students, when they start speaking to the mentor, we finish this course. The students complete the course. So we're very good. The mentors are very good about holding the students a perfect blend of what we call kind of a gentle teach and accountability. And it's quite amazed because we're forewarned in some cases, you know, that my son may not make it, it might be tough. And we find that a lot of times they're there enjoying it, working hard. So.
Nice. Sandy asks, how many weeks is the entire program, and do students meet with major choice during the school day?
So the course will typically take anywhere from 6 to 10 weeks, depending on the student. And again, it all comes back to meeting the kids where they're at, right? So we make sure that this is stepped out in a way that is appropriate for each individual student. And then in some cases, when kids have study breaks or whatnot, that's really between the student and the school, and also mentor availability. So we have had kids who have been able to work that into a school day. Usually it's after school, or there's a different time. But again, it all kind of comes down to who's available when and what the school is good for.
Great. Mike asks, do you help students with college admissions?
So that's not a service that we do at this point. What we do is we show them the educational path, but we don't get into the actual applications and that type of thing.
And I would say again, as part of the last step in the program, we will provide, if there's potential for additional services, we have relationships in the state that can help with something like that. So.
And I just want to interrupt and ask a question myself too. You all went over why the core values were really important for kids to explore in your program, and I kind of thinking about like the depth of what you do versus like the things that might happen later, like college admissions. Can you just tell us a little bit about why it's so important for kids to know what their core values are? I know, Ed, you had talked about this a little bit with us.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you think about it, how often do we, even as adults, have the opportunity to sit back and say, what's really important to me? Like, who am I? If I had to bust myself down into a few words, what are those words and why do they mean so much to me? And when you're going forward in anything, whether it be college or a career, being armed with those foundational words, we find that they're almost like guardrails, right? So they're like these kids start going down the path, and they're like, one of the things, so honesty or adventure or integrity or whatever it is, and it's actually not only is it great to have an understanding and have just that going through that exercise where you understand them, but it's also a huge confidence booster for these kids. So that's one thing that we do with this program is we build in both in person and through the courseware big confidence boosters, because once they start realizing all these positive things about themselves, then that you'll see that self-esteem start to rise, that you'll see that like, oh wow, and in those discussions where we have them give us examples, and those are some of the most magical mentor conversations, because you'll see them like, wow, I really am that, aren't I? I really do show up that way in life, don't I? And that's when we're right there to say, yes, you do, and that's why it's awesome. So.
May I chime in and ask a question that's relevant to that topic?
Sure.
So is it through coursework and like book work that they investigate these core values? You're not asking them to come up with these things whole cloth.
No, not
because
at all.
To ask my son like what he's made out of is just way too what's the word, abstract.
Yeah, no. So if we weren't clear earlier, maybe we weren't. So this is an online courseware that they go through, and so what they're going to do in the core values is we give them lists of words broken down by topic. Okay. And every single thing about this course is very granular, very breadcrumb, very stepped out. So at no point, like we have very consciously built this not to be overwhelming and to be a path to follow. So at no point are they going to be left kind of like, all right, kid, here you are in the middle of a field, go figure that out. Like, no. This is very stepped out, point by point by point. So
thank you.
Yeah, the kids love the core values section, and everything works kind of like a funnel.
Now you said you developed this. Did you literally develop it?
Yes, we did.
Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Nancy, I think you also put a question in the chat. Is it enrollment in VR or enrollment in major choice? Not both? Do you have to enroll in both, or you're enrolling in one or the other?
It's both. Because you have to be accepted, right? You have to be accepted, or rather you have to apply for and be accepted into major choice. And in order for VR to consider funding, we need you to complete our processes for either potentially eligible or eligible. So it's both.
Great, thank you.
And just on that same vein, I believe the VR counselor at the school is going to be sitting in on his IEP meeting. Will she help to facilitate this process with me?
She absolutely can, yes.
Thank you.
We have another question that is, so if a student starts at 21, do they have to stop at their 22nd birthday?
Correct, yes. Because that is that age range of 14 up to your 22nd birthday, that's federally mandated. So once a student reaches their 22nd birthday, they're no longer eligible, if you will, to receive pre-employment transition services. And Major Choice is considered a provider of pre-employment transition services. But what I would say is that, let's say the student is 21 and they still have, a fairly significant amount of time before they turn 22. I think that they still have ample time to be able to participate in Major Choice because, it's between 10 to 12 weeks. I think it would be a different story, however, if the student was 21 and then they were turning 22, 3 to 4 weeks later. That's probably not a good fit.
Thank you, Tina.
You know what though? The other thing I wanted to say, it is possible, okay? It is possible to go up to age 24 with major choice. But at that point, the student does have to become VR eligible. So if they're older, they can participate up until the age of 24, but they do have to be participating in VR services.
Okay, great. We just have a couple questions left. I know it's 6:59, but do you all mind staying on to answer two more questions?
I have all night.
Great. Okay. What are the qualifications for the mentors? How are they screened and hired?
So Brad, why don't you take this?
Sure. So first, we have an amazing group of mentors. Our team is it's been fantastic. We've been very fortunate. The mentors that we look for backgrounds in special education, and social work, anxiety, experience in working with students with anxiety. And we also, traditionally, our mentors have a master's in education or similar degree. And so we traditionally, there have been exceptions depending on, where they're at. But again, we're putting your kids in front of us as a trusted adult. We're going to go through every measure to make sure that we're bringing people in that know how to work with kids, students, young adults.
Yeah, and every mentor goes through an extensive interview with our director of curriculum, who has a double master. She actually does curriculum creation for a school district and has been in the industry for about 25 years. So they'll go through an extensive interview with her. And then, like Brad said, their backgrounds are usually as special educators or highly trained in some aspect of what we're looking for. And like sometimes like Brad mentioned, a kid will show up with anxiety or depression or a whole host of different things. And what we've become really good at is not only matching the kids to the right mentors, but having the wide range of mentors who have different specialties. And it's like, again, like Brad mentioned, we've been so blessed that once people on the mentor side hear about this, once the educators hear about this, we have been contacted by these people who we're just thrilled to have, and they're taking such good care of the students. So
Okay, and one last question. If we're interested in pursuing VR and major choice, do we start the application process with the IEP team at school, or do we apply outside of the school?
I can start that off, Brad and Ed.
Sure.
I would recommend, I think, you could go either way. I would recommend, however, that you do, as part of this, you do let your IEP team know that this is something that you're interested in. And I say that because the more partnerships we have in the transition process, the better. Whatever happens within major choice, that certainly is going to help to inform the student and their progress and their activities as they continue on in high school, and then certainly continue on with VR. So I think that these conversations are ones that you can have simultaneously. You can let your IEP team know that this is something that you want to look at, that you want to consider. And then you can also reach out to major choice and to vocational rehabilitation to be able to get more information, so that we can get you started. Yeah.
Great. And that was all the questions in the chat. So thank you everyone for attending tonight. Again, this recording will be posted, and I'm putting our Heidi and mine emails there. So if you think of another question on your drive to work tomorrow morning, you can feel free to submit it, and we'll make sure we get it over to these teams. And someone in the chat asked for contact information for Major Choice. So if Ed and Brad, you want to put your contact information in the chat, that would be great.
Sure. Majorchoice.com is our website, just in case.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'll put that out there too.
That's great. Great. And Tina, if you want to put any VR contact information, of course, we can always post that information as well. Ross asked, where will the recordings be posted? Ross, they'll be posted on our website, and you'll get an email when the recording is up. And it will also contain additional information about these organizations and how to get in touch with them. So
Great.
great.
Yeah.
Thanks to everyone.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you.
Great. Have a good night.
Thank you.